My name is Charles Harrell with the Veterans History Project. I'm here interviewing Mrs. Jennalee Ritchie McNally, a World War II veteran. Miss McNally, would you please state for the record your full name?
Jennalee Ritchie McNally.
And what is your date of birth?
January the 3rd, 1919.
And where were you born?
Bealeton, Virginia.
And what is your current address?
514 Charlotte Street, Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Here with the interview today, not only myself, Miss McNally, is her daughter, what's your name?
Terry
McNally. What war did you serve in, Miss McNally?
World War II.
What branch of service were you in?
Army Nurse Corps.
And what was your rank when you went into the Army?
Second Lieutenant.
And what was your rank when you finally were discharged?
First Lieutenant.
And could you briefly tell me where you served?
I was in Aberdeen Proving Grounds and Ordnance Center in Maryland the entire time. We were in the station hospital there.
I want you to go back into your memory as far as you can about growing up in the 1920s. Can you describe your family in the 1920s?
Oh, I was one of 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. We grew up on a farm. My father was a building contractor, and he and 2 of my brothers. The other brother was managing the farm.
Were you the middle kid?
I was the 5th.
What's your dad's name?
Wilbur Ritchie.
And your mom?
Ethel Lee Barker Ritchie.
Were they older when you were born?
You know, I don't know. I don't know what age they were.
And what did you say your father did? A contractor?
He was a building contractor. Mm-hmm.
What type of buildings did he build?
Everything from custom-built houses to he built Safeway, implement centers, and businesses of all kinds, and mostly around Warrenton. Around the Plains, some of them, but most of them around Warrenton.
Was Warrenton the close town that you all went to?
Yes.
Did you do much traveling as a young kid during the 20s?
No. As a child, we couldn't afford to. With 8 children, you know. We had a lot of company at home. We had a large farm. We had tennis courts. We had horses, and we entertained a lot at home with our friends.
When your dad was off doing the building work, who ran the farm?
Well, he came home every night from work.
And then he continued to work on the farm even at the time?
Well, he really wasn't a farmer, but he raised cattle and enough stock for us to, chickens and pigs for the family use, but that's all.
Do you recall how your dad got that farm?
He bought it. He was brought up in Harrison, Virginia. When he and my mother were married, he owned a store, a barbershop, and it had a bowling alley, all combined. And I don't remember the year, probably around 1900, or maybe even before that, probably before that. He and his brother moved over to Bealeton, where the farm is now. And the 2 of them bought the farm, and they came over with their belongings on wagons and everything across the mountains. And my mother and my aunt came over later. I'm sure they came by train.
Were they already married, your mom and dad?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, they already had several children. Mm-hmm.
So your older siblings weren't born?
They weren't born there, no. They were born over in the Shenandoah Valley.
Mm-hmm. But by the time you came around...
We were in Bealeton. Mm-hmm.
Can you... did your dad fight during the First War?
No.
Was he too old at the time, or just had children?
Had children, and I don't know the reason. His 2 of his brothers did, but he did not.
Did you have a close relationship with your dad's brothers and sisters, your aunts and uncles?
Some of them. Mm-hmm.
Did they live east of that?
Those that were near. Mm-hmm. And of course, visiting now and then, but I don't know that we had a terribly close relationship, but we did visit frequently.
What's your grandparents on your dad's side?
My grandfather wife died. My grandfather remarried, and he lived over in near Weir's Cave. He had a farm.
What was his name?
Joseph Ritchie.
And did you go visit him much
Yes. Mm-hmm.
as a young girl?
Yeah.
Did you ever go by yourself and to the granddad's house?
Yes, but always for the summers. Oh, sure. Yeah,
Can
it
you
was great fun.
What did you do for fun at your granddad's house?
Oh, I played. There were caves over there. I remember we went over and run away and sneak around and get into the caves they were small, but they were underground caves and around. Where were they? Near Weir's Cave area, in Weir's Cave area.
Did you have friends that you played with over at granddad's house? Or was it
Mostly relatives.
relative
Mm-hmm.
kids? Who was your closest playmate during those early years out there at granddad's?
I don't know that there was any particular one. I don't think there was any particular one. Mm-hmm.
How about your grandma, your grandparents on your mama's side?
They lived over in Cremora, Virginia, and I barely remember him. I barely remember him, but my grandmother I remember. She used to come and visit us. She played banjo, and she would sing and dance and play banjo. She was great fun. Yeah.
Were they hill people? Is that where this place is?
Mm-hmm. I suppose you would say so.
What was her name? Grandma's name?
Golly. Cornelia Barker. Barker was the name, but I'm trying to think of, call them grandma, to think about what the name is.
Did you go over to the grandma's house much, or did they always come
Not
to
that
yours?
when we went to my grandfather's, my father's family. We went there.
Was your grandparents basic farmers, or were they have
Yes.
skills too?
Mm-hmm.
During the 1920s...
They were poor.
Right.
Yeah, they were poor.
During the 1920s, you said two of your uncles had been in the First War. Did they ever discuss what happened in war to you?
Not to me. I was a child, and I don't think they would have discussed it with me.
Did you ever know any vets from the First War that, while you were a kid, that had been wounded?
No, not really. Not really. Mm-mm.
The 1920s is going along, and of course we call it the Roaring 20s today. Do you recall before the Great Depression how your life was on those days on the farm?
On the farm. Just that we were playing around on the farm, and we all had chores and so forth. We had gardens, and we had to go out and pull weeds. And when the corn was growing, we had to go out and pull the little seedlings off of them. They don't do that anymore. They plow so that they're not so close together. But at that time, they were just real thick, and you had to pull at the weakest part of it. We did a lot of it. Yeah.
What's the name of your brothers and sisters?
Hunter, who has died. Claude died. Dwight died. And one still living, Calvin, is up on the farm right now on home place.
Any sisters, or you don't?
Yes, Hazel. The oldest one is 90 years old, and she lives out near Leonardtown. Not Leonardtown. Is it Leonardtown? Yes. What?
St. Mary's?
On the St. Mary's River. With her daughter. They've just recently moved there. She was in Warrenton for most of her life, actually.
Growing up there on the farm, did you have any pets?
Oh yes, we always had cats and dogs, and
Did you have any?
They were not house animals, but there were lots of them outside.
Did you have any favorite one that you remember today?
I had a horse. Yes.
Tell me about the horse.
Oh, it was a retired racehorse, and my dad got that for me because I did like to ride, and my brother Dwight, his name we called him Buddy. He had a horse also. So yes, we rode, all over the farm. Quite a lot of acreage there.
You recall the horse's name?
Yes, Fanny Bell.
Fanny Bell. Did you name it, or was it already named?
It was named that when I got it. Yeah.
And you did a lot of riding?
Oh yes, and just
Tell me, during the 1920s, did your family have electricity in your house?
Have what?
Electricity?
We did not have electricity until, gosh, it was during the Depression, but I don't remember the year at all. I was probably about 13, 14 years old.
Do you recall the day you got electricity? I know you don't know the
no.
exact date.
No. Oh, no.
So there wasn't no real big change in life?
We were out in the country, and this was, we got a Delco system.
What's
where
that?
we had our own generator and everything. That's what we had.
So you didn't...
But the house was wired, and everything was wired the same as it would be now. But we just had our own generator. And
so at night you turned the generator off then?
No, generator stayed on all the time.
All the time?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Gasoline power?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I guess it was just gasoline power.
The great stock market crash comes in 1929. Can you recall, I realize you're only 10, but do you recall anything about that event happening in October?
I don't remember much about the crash. I know that the family talked about it, and everybody was just extremely upset about that. And friends that lost everything they had.
How about your dad? How did his business suffer?
Fortunately, we were all right because we had a farm and we had plenty of food. My dad and the boys did not work. Where they were not building, but we had a lumber shed, and they would build doors and windows. You didn't go out and buy doors already made and windows already framed up at that time. You made your own. They made all their own windows and everything. So they made windows and doors and whatever component they needed to build a house. They built those and then put them in the shop, in the storage shop. And when the market opened up again.
Do you recall any purchasers coming around looking at doors and windows that they had built?
Well, they would contract to build a house, and then of course they had supplied everything for it, and so I never saw that. I saw the material out there, but I saw it every day, so it didn't mean anything to me.
Did you ever go to a job with your dad?
Well, I've been to many of them. I didn't necessarily go with him, but I've been to the jobs. The one brother was an architect, and then the oldest one, he did most of the management.
And what did your dad do?
My father was the business end of it. Yeah.
Okay. The Great Depression versus the 1920s must have been traumatic on your family living out of the country. Did you or could you recall how your life might have changed from the time of before the Great Crash and then after the Great Crash?
As I said, I think that we as a family were fairly secure, except that we were made to be very aware of those around us who had really lost everything. I think we felt secure because we had food, and there were lots of them that we knew who did not have food. There were no jobs, and it was just very bad.
Your dad didn't borrow money to buy the house, then?
Yes, I'm sure he did. I don't know how much, but he did borrow. Mm-hmm.
But he didn't really talk about not being able to make a payment?
No, men at that time, they didn't discuss anything with their children particularly. I mean, they discussed it with their wives. Why, that was a big deal.
You started elementary school during the 20s, didn't you?
My first grade was in a one-room school.
What was the name of that school?
It was Lois School.
Why was it called Lois School?
Well, the there was a store, and the post office there, and that was all. And it's long gone, but it was just a little one-room school.
Do you recall your name of your teachers?
No.
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 Who was your best friend in the elementary schools?
In elementary school, I had two best friends were girls, women that are now, that were nurses during, one was an Army nurse, the other was a Navy nurse in World War II. And we kept up with each other all of that time, and we still do.
What did you do as little girls together?
Little girls play.
When you were little girls in school with these two ladies?
No, they were not with me at the one-room school. I really don't remember any of them.
Except it was a one-room school.
Yeah, I remember the family names, but I don't remember many of the first names.
So these two girls you met that you just mentioned were in middle and high school?
They were, yeah, in grade school and all through high school. We graduated together. Mm-hmm.
When you were in the 1930s, before the war started, things were happening overseas. Did you discuss in school the events?
We were glued to the radio, and yes. Mm-hmm.
Did your house have a radio also?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When Franklin Roosevelt became president in 1933, could you describe what your father felt? Was he a Republican or was he a Democrat?
He was a Democrat. Mm-hmm.
Was he relieved that that we had new leadership, or did he not really discuss it with you?
Well, I don't know whether he was relieved or not. Everyone was so very concerned and focusing on the war that they knew was going to be facing us very soon. And
did your father or brothers get jobs with the government during the Great Depression?
No.
With the New Deal or any of those projects?
Mm-mm.
Did you know anybody who worked for the government, like with the CCC or WPA?
Oh, I'm sure I did, but I don't remember any of the names. I'm sure a lot of the people around my home did, but I don't remember which ones.
When Adolf Hitler came to power in the 1930s, I know you know what happened during World War II and even afterwards. But did you, in the 1930s, see Hitler as a real threat to the world?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely.
Did you know about the things that were happening to the Jews?
No, we all probably knew the kind of person he was and the destruction that he was going to bring, not only to Germany, but to Europe all over.
I'd like to know, though, I'd like to discuss a little bit about life in the 30s. You were a young girl reaching puberty and starting to notice guys. But we also lived in a segregated South where black people and white people had different lives and different societies. What type of relationship did your family and you experience with black people in the 1930s?
Well, we had, I don't remember how old I was, probably 16, around that age, that we had two brothers that worked for us. In fact, they lived on home place. They had a little room and bathroom that they had for themselves. And they were with us for many, many years. They have worked in the garden, in the yard, and do other things around the farm.
They were black guys?
But black guys, young black guys. And at night they'd go outside and play the guitar and sing. That was great fun. We were allowed to go with them.
When you went into town, into Warrenton, did you have any fears of walking the streets at night?
No, why?
Because of racism and segregation?
No, never dreamed of it. No. In fact, when we were kids, on like Halloween night and things like that, we would walk, just maybe 4 or 5 of us, walk for probably 4 or 5 miles to meet up with friends and everything, do pranks and all.
Did you have any black friends Force girlfriend?
Well, they were not. No, they were not in the school with us, and no, we did not. Not socially.
As the war began in Europe and Hitler started attacking the other democracies such as Poland and France and Britain, did you realize the war was coming for us?
Oh yes, I think we did. We were preparing for it.
By 1936, you're getting close to graduation. Is that right? When did you graduate high school?
In '39 or '38, I went to college and to James Madison in Harrisonburg for 1 year, and then I went to University of Virginia to nursing school for 3 years.
Can you recall graduation night from high school?
Yes, just we had the graduation and the party and all.
A whole lot of friends.
Oh yeah.
Were you, if you had to characterize yourself as a young adult, would you characterize yourself? What word would you use? Would you be shy or more of a flirtatious?
No, I don't think I was shy. I was pretty outgoing. I think I had a good time.
You made friends easily?
Oh yes.
When did you first
A
meet
lot of girlfriends and boyfriends.
When did you first meet your husband to be?
When I was in the Army Nurse Corps.
So you had already gone through some college.
Oh yes.
Tell me how college was in the late 30s in Madison.
That was an all-girls school. My sister was a senior when I went in as a freshman, and the rules were not the same as they are now, but they were very strict. We could not leave campus without permission, and supposedly we did a lot of things we were not supposed to. And a friend of mine and I had an arrangement with some guys to go through my grandmother, who was in that part of the state, and we would go to see her and then go out on our dates. We could not have dates otherwise. And we did a lot of sneaking around.
Well, what did you focus on in school? Well, first of all, in high school, were you good at anything particular?
I don't think so.
And then in college, what did you like to do mostly?
I actually went in with the idea that maybe I would go to med school. That's what my father wanted me to do. But the idea was that I would go there first, and then I wanted to go on to nursing school. So.
Did you run up against any barriers as a woman trying to become a medical doctor?
No, I said that's what my father had thought that he wanted me to do. If I wanted to go into nursing, he thought I should go into medicine. But that didn't last long.
So here we are. You're a college girl. How did your father pay to go to college? Was he okay with money-wise by that time?
Yeah. I think it was about $600 a year.
Long shot from today,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Then you decide to join the Army. Is this because of the attack of Pearl Harbor?
Sure.
Do you recall the day that Pearl Harbor was attacked?
I sure do, yes.
Where were you?
I was at the hospital, working in the hospital.
Did you hear it on the radio or by the newspaper?
On radio. Mm-hmm.
What went through your mind?
Well, I think actually a lot of us were thinking, where's Pearl Harbor? We knew Hawaii, but, where is it? Yes, it was very frightening.
Later that day, where did you go?
Where did I go? I have no idea. I don't remember at all.
Did you recall exactly where you were?
I remember when I got the news. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, within a few weeks, you're thinking about joining the Army. Is that right?
Yes, our hospital sent out a number of units From soon after the war broke out, yes.
What's the name of that hospital?
University of Virginia.
In Charlottesville?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose to go into the Army versus the Navy, let's say?
I don't know that I had any particular reason. There was someone that went in with me, was interested in going in, and maybe she had some influence on it. I don't know. I don't know that I had any reason, except that I wanted to go in.
How long had you been working at the University of Virginia Hospital when Pearl Harbor started?
Just a couple of years after graduation.
When you joined the Army, where'd you have to go to sign up?
We had to join the Red Cross at that time. Go through the Red Cross in order to go in the Army.
And you went in with your friend.
Yes.
How long did you stay with your friend in the Army?
No, we didn't.
Immediately went off. I've had lots of veterans talk about going into the Army and how they all have to strip down. They get shots, all of this stuff. Did they give you all shots and physicals?
Sure. We had to run the obstacle course. The nurses did. But very early on.
Where did you do this training?
At Aberdeen.
At Aberdeen?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how it felt doing such a physical exercise such as running the obstacle course.
Well, they pushed us until we got through it. I know that.
Was the instructors that were giving you these yelling at you, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know if they were yelling. I'm sure they probably were, but yes, we had to go through the obstacle course.
Did you have male instructors or female?
Mm-hmm. Male. Mm-hmm.
Did they teach you about any weapons at all?
No, it was more or less. I don't know why we had to go through it, but it was just part of the training program.
How about barracks, those first days of Army life? Did you sleep in a barracks?
Yes, we had nurses' barracks. Mm-hmm.
How many?
But we did have private rooms. We didn't have private bathrooms, but we did each have single rooms.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't like a long row of bunks, like.
No, no. Mm-mm, no. Mm-mm.
Had you ever been so far away from home as you had been? I know you went to college in Madison, but about
I never traveled any, just around in Virginia. Mm-hmm.
How did you get up to Aberdeen? By train?
Train. Mm-hmm.
From here in Fredericksburg, or?
No, from UVA.
Oh yeah, okay.
I was there.
Mm-hmm. So you were up here in Aberdeen. Did you know anybody else in your group?
No.
But you felt like you knew how to make friends quickly enough.
Oh sure, yeah. You were thrown into duty right away. Mm-hmm.
How long did your physical training actually last? Can you recall?
Oh, that not long. I don't have any idea. I don't remember.
Not months. And months.
We just had to run the obstacle course. I do remember that. But as for having any other training, we did not. No.
How about testing? Did they make you go through testing?
No. For what?
On how good of a nurse you are.
No, as long as you have your degree, that's all.
Oh, I see. As a nurse in UVA and then with the Army, what was your primary responsibility?
I was a head nurse on actually I had 2 wards to be responsible for.
In Aberdeen?
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't start there. You started
yes.
as a head nurse?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But see, we had corpsmen to do the work. These were all men patients, you see. We had nothing but men. And so we had corpsmen to help take care of them. To help with their bathing and the dressing, the feeding and everything. But I would have to see that the doctor's orders were carried out. And to give medications. And to see that their treatments were done. To see that patients were properly cared for.
But you had done that at UVA also.
Oh,
right?
Nursing's nursing. Mm-hmm.
Was there much difference between the nursing at Aberdeen and UVA?
Mm-mm.
When you say corpsmen, are you talking men?
Men. Mm-hmm. Enlisted men.
Do you recall any of these corpsmen who seemed to do an extraordinary job?
Oh no, Yeah, they changed frequently.
How about the women nurses that you worked with at Aberdeen? Were any of them that you remember that were extraordinarily good workers that you
I don't think that any one of them was any better than the other. There were they were friends, but a lot of them just moved on. There for a while, then they were assigned to other places.
You mentioned how they're friends and they kept moving on. Did these nurses come and go, and you really didn't get much of a personal?
Oh yes,
connection?
but positions changed.
How about the doctors you worked with? Are there any that you remember?
No, I don't remember the names.
Would you consider, by thinking back on it today, that they were excellent or mediocre versus what you've seen even since then?
Oh, you mean as at today's doctors?
Yeah.
I don't think you could compare them. No more than you could compare nurses of my generation and the nurses right now. No, they don't compare. They're much more knowledgeable.
Today?
Oh, yes.
How about skill-wise?
The same. We just didn't have nearly as much to work with as they have now.
Do you recall your commanding officer, the first time you were there at the hospitals?
I should, but I don't.
Did they seem fair and reasonable type of people to work for?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I liked it there. Very happy there.
Can you describe the patients when you first arrived at the Army Hospital? What type of injuries did they sustain?
These were not patients that had been in combat. A lot of them were new inductees, and I had 2 psychiatric wings to begin with, and so there were no injuries to any of them. What
type of psychiatric problems would you have to deal with?
You name it, they did it. Many.
You think most of the patients you dealt with had legitimate psychological problems?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So there weren't many fakers that you saw?
No, I don't think so. Some of them were worse than others, but no, there was. Yes, really.
You mentioned you had 2 wards. How many wards do you think was in
Well,
that
there were
hospital?
2 of the psychiatric wings, and I had the corpsman to do the work, and I also had 1 man on each wing that was in charge of the men, and he reported to me, of course, and I reported to the doctors.
Did you have lots of paperwork to keep filled out?
Oh, yes.
Was there any time that one of these psychiatric patients got violent while
yeah.
you were there?
Oh, yes.
What would you do? Or what did you do?
Well, the men handled most of them that were violent.
Were there any that were restrained by, I don't want to say handcuffs, whatever y'all restrain them by?
Well, they had to have medication to sedate them a lot of times at that time. And I don't know what's used now.
How long did do you think you kept in charge of the psychiatric wards?
Well, I was there most all the time that I was in Aberdeen.
As the war progressed, you were in the Army for about 2 years, 3 years. Did you start seeing wounded vets?
No. They did not come there. The seriously wounded would have gone to Walter Reed, to Bethesda, and there were other station hospitals that received some of them. And we didn't have any returned combat men there.
What do you mean returned combat?
From war.
Did you notice that
That was a station hospital.
Did you notice any of the psychiatric patients were incapacitated because of combat? Not wounded as such, but messed up in the head because of combat.
Well, I think a lot of them were emotionally disturbed, and probably the reason that a lot of them were in there was because of the war.
What they saw in the war?
Well, what they saw, what they imagined that they would be facing.
You stayed in barracks the entire time you were in the service?
Mm-hmm.
How did you meet your husband?
He was the second lieutenant there, giving basic training to the new people coming in, and that's where I met him.
What's his name?
William John.
Had he been in the Army for a long time, or was he a professional soldier?
Oh no, not then. He was a second lieutenant, and I think he had been in since the war began too.
Tell me about John a little bit. What type of man was he?
William John, Bill.
William,
Mm-hmm.
okay. What type of man was he?
He had a great personality. Loved people. And he loved the Army. He went on to become a career officer.
Where was he from?
New York. Bronx, New York is where he went.
So how did he end up down here? Was it because of the Army?
Because he married me.
Do you recall the first date you all went out on?
Yes, but I'd rather not discuss it.
Right. How long was it before you knew he was the man for you?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Was
Months,
it
months.
not love at
not
first sight?
immediately. No, no.
When were you married?
In October the 16th, 1943.
Being married and a nurse, did that change your life much?
Yes, it did. In fact, we lived in an abandoned barracks while we were there on post until he had to leave.
Where did he go?
He went to Fort Stewart, Georgia, I believe, for training. But you could not find housing anywhere at any price.
When he left, did you go back into the regular nurses' barracks?
Yeah, I was there. Mm-hmm.
Did he go off and cross the Atlantic to go to war?
He went to Europe. Mm-hmm.
How long was he gone?
Oh, God, I don't know. I don't remember. He was there. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge. That was the major one with the 69th Division.
You soon became pregnant after you got
Mm-hmm.
married and you had a child.
Mm-hmm.
What happened when you became pregnant in relation to your work?
I had to be discharged because nurses couldn't stay. No one could stay in the service at that time. And I was discharged, and I came on home, and my husband had to go wherever his training took him, his service took him.
You came back into your home or your dad's?
I came back to Bealeton. Mm-hmm.
And is that where you remained for the rest of the war? Is that all?
No, I remained there, yes, until the end of the war, yes. Mm-hmm.
During those years where you were at home, I guess maybe a year and a half before the end of the war came in, did you notice any rationing going on of supplies?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Can you describe some of the things that you remember being rationed?
Well, there was sugar and butter were two of the big things, and of course their tires were rationed, and gasoline, a little bit, many things.
Did it
Silk
cause...
stockings.
Tell me about that.
What?
Silk stockings.
They were rationed.
As the
Butter
Army...
was rationed. We didn't have any butter. We were using oleo, the kind that you have to break a little package of dye in and put in. It looked like Crisco or something until you broke the packet open and mixed this coloring in it, and it looked like butter. Didn't taste like it, but...
Now you mentioned silk stockings. Did you
Nylons.
have nylon?
Yes.
Did you have nylons as a nurse, and then when you weren't a nurse, you didn't have?
Well, I wore white hose as a nurse, and there was no problem there getting them for us.
But as a civilian,
Well, wearing nylon hose. Then they were using the products for war purposes, so no, we did not have them.
Did you participate while you were at home in any scrap drives to raise metal scrap or any rubber collection?
Yes, we did. But I don't remember when. I was busy raising a baby then.
What was your father doing while the war was going on?
Well, 3 of my brothers were gone. 2 of my brothers were in the war service, and the one had a bad leg, so he could not go at all. Had severe break, and he was considered 4F, but he went down to Norfolk as an architect and worked down there for the Navy at that time during the war. But
so
he stayed on the farm.
Your father stayed on farm, or did he continue the construction business?
No, well, not much, because the boys were gone. Very little. He sort of held the business together, and that's about all.
During the later half of the war, did you primarily raise the child, or did you actually have a job too?
No, I saved that baby.
What's the name of the baby?
William John. He's now up in Vermont.
Did you, when the war ended, your husband come home soon afterwards?
Yes.
How did you keep in contact with your husband during the war?
Oh, we wrote letters. All the time.
Did you use V-mail much?
Oh, yeah. All of them did. Yeah.
Did you ever send packages to your husband?
Oh, sure. We sent packages of food and whatever they wanted.
As the war was winding down and the victory in Europe happened, we still were fighting in Japan. Did your husband come home before the war was over in Japan?
He came home in 45, October, I believe, of 45.
That was after the war was over. During the war, did you listen to the radio and what FDR had his fireside chats?
Daily.
While you were in service, before you were discharged, did you see or participate in any USO shows that were on base?
No.
The war ends in Europe in May of 1945. Do you recall that day when VE Day occurred?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember where you were?
I was on the farm. I was at home.
Did you hear it by the radio?
Radio.
Did your family have a celebration at the time that you can recall?
I'm sure we were celebrating, but I don't know that there was any particular occasion, anything that we, any particular thing that we did.
Your husband's still in the war. Was he wounded?
Yes, he was not wounded much there. He did get the Purple Heart, but he was not severely wounded in that he came home. But he went on to be a career officer, and he was wounded during the Korean War, seriously.
When he was wounded in World War II, he got treated at a first aid station or aid station.
At the hospital, probably, where they were. See, they had units all over, field units. So I'm sure that's where, like the MASH units, Yeah. So that's where he was treated.
When the war is nearing the end in Japan, we use the atomic bomb on the Japanese. Knowing what you know now about the atomic weapons and realizing what you knew back then about Pearl Harbor and everything else, how did you feel about using a new secret weapon on the enemy?
They were our enemy. And I think that it shortened the war by many, many years, saved goodness knows how many lives, although it did untold destruction to the Japanese.
Did you know who Harry Truman was?
Did I know who he was?
Yeah, before he became president.
Oh. No, not really. I mean, he wasn't a significant person to me at the time.
And then he becomes president and ultimately makes a choice to use the weapon.
Yeah.
Do you feel an urge to apologize for using that weapon against the Japs?
No. We were in Japan soon after the war ended, during the occupation of Japan. My husband and I were there. We were there for 2 years. And the Japanese that we came in contact with on a daily basis, because I had them in my home working for me and everything, taking care of my babies and everything else. And there didn't seem to be there was no animosity that they ever showed us when we were living there.
Did you ever have an opportunity, or did you want to visit the atomic blast sites in Japan?
No, we were up on Hokkaido, up on the northernmost island.
As the war ended, do you recall the day your husband finally came home?
Mm-hmm.
Did he come to your house?
We met him. He came by train, and we met him. Mm-hmm.
Where?
Up in Bealeton.
How long was it before you and your husband got your own place?
Gosh, I don't remember. It wasn't long. I don't know.
But he decided to stay here in Virginia instead of going to New York.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Any reason why he chose Virginia?
Well, that was my home, and actually he liked it. He liked Virginia. Mm-hmm.
What was his job here in Virginia after the war?
He sold insurance for about 2 years after the war, and then he decided he wanted to go back in the service. He had stayed in the reserves while he was out, and so he went back in with the commission with his rank, and he went in and shortly was sent to Japan.
Going to Japan was a drastic change from rural Virginia.
Oh, it was. And I had 2 children when I went over there. We went by train to Seattle and then by ship to Japan, to Yokohama.
Your service in the military, did it leave you with any skills you didn't have before? Did you learn anything?
I'm sure I learned a lot, but in what do you mean?
Did they teach you anything additional that you maybe would not have learned in a regular hospital?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Did you continue with a career after the war?
No, because I went on to have 5 children, and I stayed home, raised my children, and then after they were all grown, I just went back to the hospital and worked a little bit, but not much.
Did you ever join any veterans organization,
No.
being a veteran? No. When they opened the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
I haven't been yet. I want to go, yeah.
Because it honors not only your service, but also your husband's.
Well, yes, I've been to see all the others, and I just haven't been to that one yet.
Right.
I've had some surgery and had to put off a lot of things.
Did you ever join a veterans organization like the American Legion? No. How does your opinion about war, how is it because of your service in the hospital? I realize you dealt with psychiatric patients primarily. After being there for 3 years and seeing, I don't want to use the word nut cases, but people who are...
No, they weren't. They were just
crazy, disturbed.
Poor, disturbed people.
How does your opinion about war in general, how's that changed because of that experience from back in the 30s to...
I don't think that changed. I don't think that changed my way of thinking at all, because we had them in civilian life also.
How about war today? How's your feeling about
What
war
about war?
today?
I don't think that we should have rushed into Iraq the way we did. I think we should had more time to find out where those so-called weapons of mass destruction were, and had more support from other countries. But we're in there.
Did you see after the war, World War II, a lot of people who were disturbed because of the war mentally in regular life?
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
What makes World War II different, in your opinion, than, let's say, Korea or Vietnam?
Well, our own country was bombed. There was a need to defend our country then, a great need. And I think that everyone wanted to go. All the men wanted to go. They felt guilty if they were 4F, if they were not taken.
As a young woman, did you feel like it was your duty also to do your job?
Yes, I think we all did. Yeah.
And thank you very much for your interview. Is there any final comments or words you'd like to
No.
say? You've been a very enjoyable person to speak to.
Thank you.